From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on May 8th, 2026 from South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia. On this episode, we're bringing you everything we have right now on an expedited redistricting push by Statehouse Republicans, all at the behest of the White House. While the train is certainly moving, literally no one knows where it's going. I know there's a couple conductors, we got a couple cars, but the track just keeps going. How many stops there are, we don't know. What it would actually mean for Republicans, still not very clear. Even leaders are concerned about what the new maps could mean. But hey, we got a week left in legislative session, so let's throw some redistricting on top of it. That being said, this is all about redistricting because so much happened this past week. Hopefully you've been reading the gavel because we've been documenting that all week at SCETV.org/the gavel, where Tuesday through Friday for the final week, thank God. My unchecked air, myself bring you recaps, previews, big and small Statehouse moments, meeting schedule highlights, photos, videos, and more. There's more. The big and small. And a lot of that will be in the pod today. It has really been the best way to keep up this entire week, and that's what it's created for moments like this as things are moving fast and furious, Tokyo Drift style. And sadly, I made an executive decision to redistrict the wind down from the podcast, but that doesn't mean you can't call. Your vote will still count, if you will. We need you to call 803-563-7169. This is purely a partisan play on my part. And by partisan, I mean time constraints. I'm running late today. AT's chomping at the bit here, and I get it, but there's just been so much happening. I want to bring you a nice full episode. So if you have questions, please call 803-563-7169. You can also email us at the gavel. There's an email link there online at scetv.org/the gavel. All right, we're focused entirely on this latest redistricting moves that are happening. And the easiest way to do this when we have big things is to start at the beginning. A, B, C, D, do, re, mi.
Gotcha.
Actually, let's go back even further. Time warp. Before the start of this session, where we asked legislative leaders about their appetite for redistricting. Do you remember what they were saying back then?
You tell me.
There was no appetite for redistricting, okay?
Okay.
In fact, let's go back to February 25th. Keep in the rewind machine when the House Judiciary Constitutional Laws Subcommittee, remember that name, was pushed to take testimony on a redistricting bill by House Freedom Caucus Chairman Jordan Pace, Republican from Berkeley. It was an hour-long meeting. It went nowhere, but we covered it in the February 28th lead if you want to listen to that. It didn't go anywhere because leadership was not supportive of such a measure. There's been a lot of pressure, a lot of calls from outside the State House, even from other Republicans, even the gubernatorial race, saying we got to redistrict, we got to do this. Inside the State House, it's a different story. But let's continue on. Filing for the June 9th primaries, which includes statewide constitutional officers, the governor's race, the U.S. Senate race with Senator Lindsey Graham's seat, all 124 State House seats, and all 7 congressional seats opened 2 weeks later after that hearing on March 16th. Filing closed 2 weeks later on March 30th. At that time, ballots were being created, voting machine databases were being built, the process was put into complete motion.
The die was cast.
The primary field was set from statewide offices down to those local races. In fact, the poor beleaguered State Election Commission also appointed longtime Greenville Elections Director Conway Belanger as its new director in the middle of all this. And he was confirmed a month later by the State Senate and continues to lead the agency as it gears up for the primaries. You've heard our interview together. The man knows what's up. More from him in a moment. So things are in motion in the background while candidates continue to campaign, fundraise, participate in forums, meet voters, and juggle their lives, and also ask you for money, knowing that there's the June 9th primary coming up. While the campaign trail heats up, so do the final days of the legislative session, as sine die is May 14th. It's always my favorite time of year, every 2 years when this coincides together. Now, lawmakers at this point still haven't approved a sine die resolution. Wonky term, I know, but it dictates what they can do and what they can't do after the gavel comes down on sine die, the last day of session at 5 p.m. Usually a resolution involves them being able to take up a conference committee reports on bills that they hashed out the differences on. It allows them to continue working on the budget, the inevitable budget vetoes, that took me a moment to say, and much more. Then enter 2024, when the U.S. Supreme Court upheld South Carolina's 2022 redistrict congressional maps. That was done after the 2020 census. That's when they are typically redrawn. After we get that census done, they use that data, they make new maps, they put it in place for the next general election. Now, the court specifically upheld the first congressional district map, ruling it a partisan gerrymander, not an unconstitutional racial gerrymander, as a lower court had decided. Now, this was all boosted by the Supreme Court's 2013 Shelby County, Alabama v. Holder decision that effectively dismantled Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which required states like South Carolina with histories of racial discrimination in voting to get approval from the Department of Justice before implementing new maps. That was a practice called preclearance that no longer exists. Now, fast forward to the midterms, where historically the incumbent president has lost majorly in the midterm elections, usually throwing Congress out of sync. And 2026 is no different, and Republicans hold an incredibly slim majority in the House and a 53 to 47 seat majority in the Senate, which is increasingly being put into play in these midterms. All that has led states, starting with Republican-led Texas, to kick off a wave of mid-cycle redistricting, including in North Carolina last fall, not weeks before the primaries, last fall, which North Carolina picked up an additional Republican seat, putting them at an 11-3 advantage over Democrats. Now, democratically controlled states like California and recently Virginia have followed suit, putting them to referendum, with the Virginia Supreme Court just today throwing out the results of that state's redistricting referendum last month as unconstitutional. Virginia's new state map would have gone from 6-5 to 10-1 for Democrats. A lot of background here, guys. I'm giving you the context. Now, on April 29th, a mere 9 days ago, when we were on that one track, the train was going on that track. We knew where this station was. It was called Sine Die, May 14th. U.S. Supreme Court decided to change tracks for us and ruled 6-3 to severely limit Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act in Louisiana v. Calais. This section is responsible for the creation of those majority-minority districts, such as the 6th Congressional District that Jim Clyburn has occupied since 1992, as a result of the VRA, making him the first black person to be elected to Congress in the state of South Carolina since the last of the first 8 black members of Congress had left office 95 years prior at the end of Reconstruction. If you want to know more about those congressmen, racial discrimination in voting, Jim Crow, and more, you can read Clyburn's The First 8. It's a super handy book, especially in moments like this when we have historic changes. Meanwhile, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry has suspended the state's congressional primaries, even as some 42,000 ballots had already been cast. But you know what? That's their map. That's their Supreme Court decision. That's their track. Okay? We already did our tracks, but we're still chugging. So the court says you don't have to worry about pre-clearing these maps in these states with a hard racial past, and it is now saying you don't have to worry about creating such districts that were made to give disenfranchised voters, specifically black voters, a voice that previous levels of gerrymandering prevented. Now here we are, with days left in session, a few weeks left until early voting on May 26th starts, and primaries are on June 9th. Overseas ballots have already been mailed, military ballots have been mailed, machines are ready to go, and some 300 ballots are already being returned as of this recording. A week ago, Governor Henry McMaster, who has not pushed for mid-cycle redistricting, tweeted that, quote, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld South Carolina's current congressional map in 2024. In light of the court's most recent decision on the Voting Rights Act, it would be appropriate for the General Assembly to ensure that South Carolina's congressional map still complies with all requirements of federal law and the U.S. Constitution. Quote, then President Donald Trump started calling for states to redraw the maps after this decision. And again, like I said, South Carolina's maps do hold up. The Calais decision pertains to Section 2 of the VRA. Our maps were challenged under Section 5. Nothing in the Calais decision triggered some need for an automatic redraw in South Carolina. It is purely for Republicans to try and gain all 7 seats. These are not my words, folks. In fact, Florence Republican Jay Jordan, who's chairman of the House Judiciary Constitutional Law Subcommittee, explicitly said that on Friday at the first hearing on this matter.
This map was recently produced following the Supreme Court's decision in Louisiana v. Calais and aims to achieve the state's political goal of maximizing the state's ability to elect Republican congressperson from each of the 7 congressional districts. All right. So just for members of the subcommittee,
Yes, that was a collective groan from opponents gathered in the meeting room. But I'm getting ahead of myself because on Tuesday, we're going day by day here, folks, things began to blow up in the Statehouse. Despite Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey, a Republican from Edgefield, saying, and you've heard him say it, messing with the maps can actually mess with Republican power. In fact, Massey told us on Tuesday that he had received 2 calls over 2 days from President Donald Trump, in which he told him the problems the changing maps would create for Republicans by making solid districts more competitive. Here's Massey.
I have talked to the president twice.
Today?
Once today.
Is that the first time you've ever heard from the president?
Yesterday was the first time I talked to the president. Yeah.
Did you express your concerns? Did you express your concerns about the maps?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a very good conversation. I mean, we talked about a number of things, frankly. Very good conversation. There was no pressure. But I very much appreciated the call, and even the call today was very good too. No pressure today either. So,
what was his ask? What would you like to see you all do?
In light of the Supreme Court decision last week, to take a look at it.
And pass a redistricting bill?
Well, I mean, he asked us to take a look at it when I spoke with him.
Did you express some more concerns that you've expressed here to him as well? I mean, he doesn't know the on-the-ground conditions here.
Well, so I've had a number of conversations with other people at the White House as well, and I've expressed my concerns to them, so they know what my concerns are.
Would you mind just in brief repeating your concerns? 1, 2, 3.
Well, I mean, it's more than 3.
Well, 4, 5, 6 then.
It's and I don't know if I've got time to go through. I mean, look, I'm concerned about whether we can hold 7 seats. Frankly, I'm concerned that if you, as I've said before, that if you get cute with this and you start playing with it too much, that you could actually end up losing seats. And I don't want to go through an effort like this and you end up being in the same spot. I certainly don't want to be in a worse position. I'm concerned about the state Supreme Court because they were very clear in their ruling last September. I'm concerned about preserving communities of interest and our historical basis for how we've had congressional districts drawn. I mean, I've got a number of concerns. I could probably think more when, just standing here.
Again, that was Massey there talking with a gaggle of reporters while the Senate was still in session, and he was expressing those concerns that he told us about last week in the podcast when we got him on Statehouse Today to talk about this. Nothing's changed there with this man. His gaggle on Tuesday came minutes after we spoke with House Speaker Mo Smith about the plan for the House Rules Committee to amend the sine die resolution Wednesday morning. Sine die resolution's back, folks, and it got amended Wednesday morning to include redistricting. So we're tying 2 big political footballs together. Hard not to vote for it. Here's Majority Leader Davey Hyatt and Speaker Smith talking with us reporters.
Well, the primaries for the congressional districts could be delayed under that scenario, but the House districts and the statewide could move forward. So there are many options, and those have not been decided. You got to cross the first step, and the first step is: are we allowed to consider redistricting when we finish our sessions and during sine die? So it has to pass the House by 2/3 votes, and it has to pass the Senate by 2/3 votes. So that when we pass that, then we can figure out where we're going afterwards.
We'll just have to let everybody decide. I mean, we talked about it in caucus a little bit today, but we don't know how everybody's going to vote. That's a decision everybody has to make on this, because this is something that just all of a sudden appeared on the calendar. We got 5 days left, so we're moving at a rapid pace to try to get to see if we want to do this process. So we've got to get to in 5 days we got to decide whether or not we want to do this process, and that's what we're trying to do right now, is get to the process.
In terms of knowing stuff to know whether you want to get there, have you consulted with the Election Commission to know how those absentee ballots that have already gone out would be handled?
I don't know about absentee, but there's some military ballots and absentee ballots that are out. Yet the answer to that is yes. But I remind you, there's a statewide election as well that would still go forward, so those would be cast and counted anyhow. But the real issue is whether we get into the early voting, and so that's why if something happens, it needs to occur before the early voting period.
Smith noted that he had not spoken with the president, though he had seen the king recently. Now, the Senate passed 883. This is the clean sine die back in February, which again allows for post-session items to be taken up like conference committee reports and vetoes. On Wednesday, there was a brief meeting in the Rules Committee where outgoing Charleston Democrat Representative Spencer Wetmore voiced her concern.
honestly, just when I think we cannot get any more sycophantic and obsequious, we sink to a new low. We're so afraid of upsetting the 9% of South Carolinians that vote in Republican primaries that we just trip all over ourselves to do their bidding. We're so obsessed with abortion and bathrooms and monuments and Sharia law that we don't take the time to work on real policies. And now Daddy Trump calls and needs to grasp at some power. And once again, we jump and run. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And in some ways, it's kind of ironic because it's the party's weaponization of the Voting Rights Act that got us into this mess in the first place, that created a situation where we only care about primary voters. And if I thought today's amendment was some altruistic effort to hear real South Carolinian voices, I might be inclined to support it. What makes it so ironic for me to oppose this is that letting y'all keep focusing on just the absolute least helpful policies imaginable and jumping and running whenever the party, or in this case Trump, calls, it will eventually cost this caucus and the Republican caucus. And feed a monster long enough, it comes back to eat you too. And, you know, part of me recognizes that this redistricting could, in theory, help other Democratic districts. The math is not lost on me. But I can't get there. I don't think this is a good faith effort. I'm frankly disappointed that we're here having this meeting this morning.
The amended sine die resolution moved out of that committee and was approved by the House on Wednesday by a vote of 87 to 25, party lines there, but not before several Democrats spoke, including Orangeburg Democrat Gilda Cobb-Hunter. Here she is.
As has been pointed out, for some of us, we say, you go guys, you go girls, go and redraw the maps. Because I believe very strongly that the unintended consequences of your action, chickens are going to come home to roost, and you're going to wind up with a different set of numbers than you think you will have. As somebody who, again, was here before, I don't understand on either side of the aisle why there is concern about this map. The current congressman signed off. The current 6th Congressional District congressman signed off on the map that we have. It is important for me to be factual and not emotional. And I've shared with my colleagues, you really need to be careful when you are throwing rocks, because Democratic hands, in my view, are just as dirty when it comes to redistricting as Republican hands. There was a tremendous amount of collusion in this last redistricting. I know it, and some of you know it, whether you admit it or not.
So the sine die resolution 883 is now in the Senate, and it needs to pass by 2/3 of the members present and voting. Republicans do have a very slim supermajority. And again, it's also tied to what they can do after session. So the Senate could, with apprehension, pass it and say they're going to continue to look at the maps, possibly dawdle if they want to stall, and say, we'll get to it after sine die and placate folks and do those things, but maybe not actually do anything with the map, right? They could say they're going to do it, not do anything. And that's because they're not up for re-election this year. All 124 House members, specifically 24 Republicans who have primary challengers, are up for re-election. And while 5 Indiana state senators lost their primaries recently for opposing redistricting, memories are very short these days in politics, and maybe the map gets redrawn in 2028. I mean, it doesn't seem like we're ever going to have any off-season here when it comes to redrawing these things. And it likely will need to be redrawn again because not just our congressional districts, majority-minority districts in the state, but we have some state house and state senate districts that will be under the gun now because of all this coming into play. But those are ramifications for a different podcast on the same train track. We thought there was going to be movement in the Senate on Thursday to take up this resolution, the sine die resolution. In fact, they gavelled in and then they immediately went into their respective Democratic and Republican huddles for about an hour. They came out. We were all ready. Get the vote tally sheets ready. They didn't do anything. They didn't take up the resolution saying that they had not seen a map yet, so they can't vote. So, okay, at that point I said, great, CMI on. I'm going to go down to Bluffton to see Senator Lindsey Graham on the campaign trail and get his take on this process. Here is Senator Graham.
I would recommend that everybody look at the map and see if it's a net positive. It's up to the state legislature to do this. But in trying to pick up a seat, you don't want to jeopardize other seats. So I've been told, I don't know if this is accurate, that 3 Republican districts go from the mid-60s to the mid-50s, that the new 6th district will be 51% Republican. That's not exactly a runaway. So when it comes to the map, I understand people are trying to pick up a seat. Just use common sense.
Senator, have you talked to President Donald Trump about this? And if so,
I've told his people that, make sure the map accomplishes the goal. If at the end of the day we create a map that gives Democrats more competitive opportunity, what have you gained? You may pick up 1 seat, you may risk 2 or 3 others. I'll leave it up to the representatives and the senators.
On late Thursday, a map emerged and was presented at the Judiciary Subcommittee Friday morning. And it changed. I'm going to give you a little rundown because you got to visualize it with me here, folks. It changes the democratically held 6th congressional district to encompass the PD and takes on the current Midlands portion of the 5th congressional district, including all of Lancaster County and part of York County. Let's travel back to the coast from the PD. In the 7th congressional district, it would include all of Horry and Georgetown counties down to Folly Beach. The Charleston Peninsula and North Charleston would be in the proposed 7th congressional district. See you later, 1st congressional. Some of the more interesting changes would stretch the upstate 3rd congressional district from the far northwest corner of the state with all of Oconee County to include counties on the southern border into Richland County, including much of downtown Columbia. Welcome to the 3rd congressional district. That would put Clemson University and the University of South Carolina
in the same far-flung district.
Likewise, District 5 would also include a northern portion of Richland County and run the northern route of counties to the North Carolina border, up and around through Cherokee County to Pickens County, where the district would meet again with District 3. So they meet in the Midlands and in the upstate. Bizarre, but here we are. In between those 2 districts, in the little donut hole we'll call it, is District 4 that includes the bulk of Greenville and Spartanburg counties, though some of those get picked off in the other districts. And it also includes all of Lawrence County. Now you're saying, Gavin, where's District 2? I'm going to tell you.
Wow.
District 2 includes the southern portion of Richland County and Lexington County down to the Georgia border, down to Hampton County, Bamberg, and Orangeburg County. So Orangeburg County is now going to be in District 2. We'll see what Joe Wilson has to say about that. Which leaves District 1 with Jasper and Beaufort counties up to the remainder of the Charleston area and all of Dorchester and all of Berkeley County. So it's interesting to visualize, but we'll see what happens with that. But again, what we're seeing with the numbers on here is that you've seen these numbers drop from solid Republican to competitive Republican. Leans, toss-up. I mean, that's the ratings you're going to get for these districts that are really going to be competitive, and you're going to see money coming in. If Jim Clyburn has to move around, guess who's going to come throwing money in that race? Now, one piece of legislation that was advanced to the full committee on Friday was H 5684, and that would move the congressional primary, just the congressional primary date, to August 11th from June 9th. And this, again, despite overseas and military ballots already being sent out and some 300 being returned. Elections Director Conway Belangia, we talked about him, he was asked about the feasibility of changing ballots and machines that are already prepared, tested, and ready for June 9th.
Paper ballots and the machine ballots are hooked at the hip. They come from the same database. To change the database now would be very detrimental to trying to conduct the election. And trying to retool those machines now in any fashion would be very costly and very problematic, prone to mistakes, because we wouldn't have the opportunity to test those databases going forward. And so it would definitely set us up for potential failure in the elections in June.
His words there, set up for failure. That's where we're at. That's where I'm leaving it at, guys. There was a lot of testimony. No one spoke in favor of this process. And there are already meetings scheduled for next week in the House to continue this discussion. Again, everyone's saying we just want to have the discussion, but then you're having a discussion and there's already a map. So we're already going past a couple bases. This is nothing compared to what we saw when it came to actual redistricting previously done by the legislature. This is a completely rushed process, as you heard from Jay Jordan, the chairman of that subcommittee, purely for political reasons. So stay tuned. Again, like we said, this train has no brakes. So this is the end of the show. No wind down. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, we appreciate that. You can always leave us a review at Apple Podcasts or give us a voicemail, 803-563-7169. Please don't call with your version of the map. I don't want to look at it. I know there are things you can do out there and make your own. We'll see where we go. All TBD. Of course, you can always stay up to date with the latest news on SCETV.org and SouthCarolinaPublicRadio.org, and don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lead is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lead, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina. You gotta get a lot of train horns. You gotta go. Yeah. God, this guy's a train freak.